Hey everybody, this is Tracy here with another edition of A View from Tracy's Point. And just still trying to absorb everything that's going on. And so, of course, it's a new day and a new issue going on. And so, if you have not heard, Mr. Kelly was placed on the S word watch over at the MDC. And this is generally normal procedure whenever someone is sentenced to like a really long prison term. They will do that. But Jennifer Bonjean has other thoughts on that, and we are going to talk about why she has now filed a lawsuit against the MDC. Okay, before we get started, you guys saw, well, even if you didn't see the video, I'm sure you heard that Mr. Kelly received a 30-year prison sentence. And so I want to break down what that sentence is, because he was actually received multiple prison sentences, but his sentences will run concurrent, which means that all the sentences will take place at the same time, and that the sentence with the longest amount of time was the one with the 30-year sentence. And so these were the notes. It says where they were talking about the trial, and then it goes into, I can't even read my own notes. The defendant is sentenced to 360 months on count one. And what did I say? 360 months. Is that the 30 years? I can't even remember. When I tell y'all, I am so tired. Lord have mercy. What did I say? 360 divided by 12. Okay, so that's the 30 years. And that's basically the racketeering charge. And then he also, let's see, he's finishing 360 months on count one, which was a racketeering charge, 10 years on counts 2, 6, and 8. 20 years on counts 3, 4, 5, 7, and 9. All counts to run concurrently. 5 years supervised release, $900 special assessment, $100 fine. The defendant was informed of the right to appeal. The parties are directed to submit a proposed schedule for submissions for the hearing on restitution. Restitution hearing is set for September 28th, 2022 at 11 o'clock a.m. And the reason they're having this restitution hearing is because I guess they learned that he had transferred the rights to some of his recordings, the masters of some of his recordings, to a friend of his or to someone, and that I need to research it because I don't want to give you guys the wrong information, but it has something to do with $5 million. And if you guys recall, I did do a video last year where it was revealed that he was trying to sell the rights to some of his music for like $20 million, but nobody would touch it. Nobody would, give him the money because they didn't know how this thing was going to turn out and whether or not the music was going to be worth anything if he was found guilty on these charges. And as I've told you all, several times before, when, you say he's worth, $900 million and all of this, his music is not worth that much money in the current market. The value of a person's masters changes from day to day. And so right now, with him being convicted on these charges, his masters, even though people are streaming the music and he's earning royalties, currently the masters really have no value. They don't have that type of value. Now, if heaven forbid he was to pass away tomorrow, then the music would have great value. So your masters are more valuable to you once you have left this earth than they are when you are alive. And so I believe that this music that they're talking about is not music that was recorded through Sony. It could be music that he wrote for people. It could be, I don't know what the music is, but it's not from the large body of work, which is under the control of Sony and RCA. But I will do some research on that story. I only saw bits and pieces. And then I was just scrolling through social media and saw, I think it was Go Home Roger, who follows my channel, and he was telling me that, I believe it was him, it might have been somebody, it may have been Ray Johnson, but one of them were mentioning in the comments on another video about IG and how people were responding in IG. And so I did find a post that the Shade Room shared that Ariel had made, where she said, something about God never makes mistakes or something like that, but the devil do, or vice versa. The devil doesn't make, child, I don't know what the hell she was trying to say, but anyway. Some people in them comments shredded her to pieces. And it just got me to thinking about how there are people who haven't read not one motion, don't know what the charges were against him, don't have any clue about what transpired in court, but just have such an opinion about what was going on. And so they were in the comments talking about Ariel has Stockholm syndrome, and why can't people understand this about these children? And I'm just sitting there like, what children are y'all talking about? And this girl doesn't have any Stockholm syndrome? Like, what? And so they just get angry in the comments and just go on and on and on. And I'm just like, oh my goodness, I just can't take this. And then I came across another post on the Shade Room where it was a clip of Javante Cunningham talking. And I was surprised to go through the comments, and they were dragging her for filth as well. And then it always go back to like, what were your parents doing? And somebody commented on one of my posts and saying, well, the parents didn't care and that type of stuff. And then people always want to say, well, it doesn't matter what the parents were doing, blah, blah, blah. He was wrong. And nobody is saying that he was right, if he was having these relationships with these people. But it is a bigger picture. It is not cut and dry. And they love to say, everybody hates black women. And it's not about hating black women. It is about having accountability for your actions and your decisions. And if you want to say, that Ariel, Javante, all of these people weren't old enough to have, to make the right choices, which I keep telling you, I know when I was 16, 17 years old, I had a very clear mind and I knew right from wrong. And it didn't even matter what my parents see. What makes their situation different is stuff that I did that I knew I was wrong when I was their age. My parents didn't know anything about it, right? In this case, these parents know what their daughters was doing. And trust me, what their daughters was doing, I was not doing. Okay, I was not out there sleeping with grown men and running behind celebrities and stuff like that, except for that story I told y'all about Daryl Strawberry. But even when Daryl Strawberry called my bluff, what did I do? Me and my girl turned about face and took our butts home, right? Because we knew we was tripping. But anyway, so I just think that people, like, maybe we just need to have a community conversation, because when all of this stuff was taking place, especially in the 90s, and I keep saying, like, this was during the drug era. This was during a time when rap music, like in the 80s when I was, graduating, from high school, and the rap industry was changing from hip hop to, well, actually not from rap, from, the fun rap that we used to have back in the day, with the Sugar Hill Gang and stuff like that. And then all of a sudden it became this different genre, where we had the video vixens and the video hoes, and that they were referred to, and they were just promoting promiscuity, get money any way you can. And so the opinions and views of young people change, because most people, if most women were to be honest, their parents tell them, find a good man with a good job who can afford to take care of you, right? And so we know that once, we see all this designer stuff being promoted in the music videos and that type of thing, and the fancy cars, well, the 15, 16-year-old high school boy that's trying to take you to the movies on Saturday, he can't provide you with all that. Chances are he is borrowing his daddy's car. His daddy probably not driving a Mercedes or a G-Wagon or any of that. And so that puts it in the mind of these young women that, hey, if you want to have those things and you want somebody to take care of you in that way, then this is what you need to do. You got to go find somebody who can provide that. And during the time that, some of this stuff that they allege took place, that was during the time, when the drug epidemic was really, really bad. And I know here it was the crack cocaine, but I'm thinking in Chicago, it probably was like the meth and the heroin and that type of thing, because I had my best friend from high school was from New York, and her uncle was a drug addict. Several people in her family actually were drug addicts. And so, and you figure up in that era, that's where all the hip hop artists, the rap artists, the gangster rappers and all of that were coming out of those areas. And so the mindset was very, very different. And so you're prosecuting somebody according to today's Me Too standard, when the alleged acts happened, during when a standard was different. It was totally different. The mindset was different. And then people don't want to hold the parents accountable, but the parents are accountable, because you have a responsibility to protect your children, right? And trust me, there was no way, like I had limits in my parents' household. There is no way that I could have been skipping school, running behind some grown man, being in some grown man apartment day after day and all of this stuff, and my parents not know about it. Because I told y'all in that video about when my mom was sleeping on that sofa, and I was like 18 at the time, and she was sleeping on the sofa trying to catch me coming into the house at 3:00 in the morning. So I don't know where these parents were, but there's definitely a conversation that needs to be had, because there are a lot of people who have a very distorted perception, or they are just in denial, or maybe this is their way that they knew that what they were doing when they were those ages as teenagers. And so they think by, trying to coddle the Azriels and the Javante Cunninghams and saying they were victims and didn't know what they were doing and didn't have a full understanding, like maybe that is them suppressing the things that they knew that they were out there doing that they didn't have any business doing. Because I just don't understand just the whole. And I really have gotten to the point where I said I'm going to stop reading comments, because I just can't have a conversation with somebody who is that close-minded and aren't really ready to have a real conversation about this topic. But in any event, I didn't mean to go on a rant. It's just that people have really been getting on my nerves. But it is interesting to see more people seemingly open to hearing more about the case. And I thought it was interesting that there is a YouTuber and a person on Twitter that I follow named Share is Love. Shar is Love, I think is her handle. And she has been posting repeatedly the transcripts about Alice Clary and the text messages and all the information that was gathered about her and how she was forcing her daughter into this relationship, and nobody was really picking up on it. And so now Lil Boosie, the rapper, has picked up on it, and then it appears that Twitter is sort of banning, because you would think somebody as well known as him would have more views, but then somebody else was saying that his comments really don't get that many views. So he's obviously being shadow banned, sort of how YouTube has been not necessarily shadow banning my content, but they have been flagging my content and basically not going to the review of the content until I actually make the video live, and then it gets all the majority of the views that it's going to get, and then they'll review it and say, oh yeah, this is okay content. So basically they don't care if you put the content out there, but they don't want you to earn revenue from it. So let's go on to Jennifer Bonjean. After learning that they put Mr. Kelly on this watch, came out, reactivated her Twitter and was like, not on my watch. And so it's the United States. They're suing the Eastern District, well, not the Eastern District of New York, but the Bureau of Prisons at the Metropolitan Detention Center in Brooklyn. And it's the lawsuit was filed in the Eastern District of New York. It says plaintiff Robert S. Kelly, by and through attorneys, the Bonjean Law Group, PLLC, for his complaint alleges as follows: nature of the action. 1. Plaintiff is currently an inmate at the Metropolitan Detention Center, MDC, Brooklyn, a federal detention center in Brooklyn, New York. On June 29, 2022, plaintiff was sentenced before the Honorable Judge Ann Donnelly in connection with the criminal case under indictment number 19 CR 286. Despite having no suicidal tendencies, the defendant and MDC officials placed plaintiff under the harsh conditions of an S-watch immediately after his sentencing hearing, causing him serious and irreparable harm. Plaintiff was placed on watch as a form of punishment, even though he was not, at any risk, causing him severe mental distress. This conduct is the result of negligence and deliberate indifference of the defendants and numerous federal officials. Defendant knew that plaintiff was not a risk when they placed him under watch, subjecting him to cruel confinement. Plaintiff was placed on watch solely for punitive purposes and because of his status as a high-profile inmate. Jurisdiction and venue. This action arises under the Federal Tort Claims Act, Title 28, United States Code, Section 26771, and the United States Constitution, Bivens versus 6 unknown named agents of Federal Bureau of Narcotics, 403, Section 388, which was a case heard in 1971. This court has jurisdiction over the federal claims pursuant to Title 28, United States Code, Section 1331, and then she goes on to give, the court cases. Venue is proper in this district pursuant to Section 28, United States Code, Title 28, United States Code, Section 1391. Parties. Plaintiff Robert Kelly is an individual who is currently housed in the MDC. Defendant Warden Heriberto H. Telles is the warden of MDC Brooklyn, and at times relevant to this lawsuit, Defendant Telles is sued in his individual capacity. Defendant MDC is a federal correctional facility located in Brooklyn, New York. Defendant United States of America at all times operated the MDC Brooklyn and employed defendant Tellus. Defendant United States is sued under the Federal Tort Claims Act for the wrongful and torturous acts of its employees and agencies. Defendant unknown. MDC Brooklyn officials are officials who either had supervisory authority and or the opportunity to observe and intervene with respect to the acts of placing defendant under watch, even though he was not at risk. Jury demand. Plaintiff hereby demands a trial by jury on all of his claims in this action. Factual allegations. Mr. Kelly was sentenced before the Honorable Judge Donnelly on June 29, 2022, in connection with his case. After his sentencing hearing, Mr. Kelly was placed on watch in violation of his Eighth Amendment guarantees because he is not at risk, and expressly told MDC officials that he was not at risk and had no thoughts of harming himself or others. MDC Brooklyn has a policy of punishing high-profile inmates by placing them under the harsh conditions of these types of watches, even though they are not at risk. Indeed, as recently as June 25, 2022, another high-profile inmate, Jesslyn Maxwell, was placed on watch even though she was not at risk. MDC Brooklyn's policy can be described as arbitrary, cruel, and unconstitutional. Mr. Kelly and his attorney had lengthy discussions in advance of his sentencing regarding the outcome of his sentencing proceedings, and Mr. Kelly was fully prepared for the sentencing hearing. Nothing occurred during sentences that came as a surprise to Mr. Kelly. In the days leading up to sentencing, Mr. Kelly preemptively expressed a concern to his counsel that MDC would place him on watch as a matter of policy, as it did after his jury returned a verdict of guilt, even though he was not at risk. Mr. Kelly repeatedly stated to his counsel and anyone who would listen at MDC that he was not at risk and had no thoughts of hurting himself. Mr. Kelly suffered emotional distress after he was placed on watch after the jury verdict in his case on September 27th. September 27, 2021. She got an extra 0 in there. Even though he was not at risk, Mr. Kelly harbored legitimate concerns that MDC would again place him on watch after his sentencing for punitive reasons. Immediately after his sentencing hearing, Mr. Kelly's counsel spoke with Mr. Kelly, and Mr. Kelly again reiterated that he was not experiencing any feelings of hopelessness or any thoughts of hurting himself. Mr. Kelly was behaving in a totally appropriate manner, but was concerned that MDC Brooklyn would place him on watch without justification for doing so. Mr. Kelly and his attorney put a plan in place where Mr. Kelly was instructed to email his attorney upon return to the MDC to confirm he had not been placed on watch, and that if his attorney did not receive such an email, his attorney would begin inquiring of his status. When his attorney did not receive an email from Mr. Kelly, his attorneys immediately began reaching out to the MDC and was stonewalled for 48 hours. MDC employees refused to put counsel through to anyone in the legal department to discuss his status. Indeed, MDC employees repeatedly obstructed undersigned counsel's ability to determine the well-being of Mr. Kelly and advocate for him. The legal department ignored counsel's many emails and messages. Through the assistance of prosecutors on Mr. Kelly's case, Mr. Kelly's attorneys confirmed that he was indeed placed on a watch. Mr. Kelly's placement on this watch is unrelated to him being at risk of harming himself and was done consistent with the MDC's policy designed to cause harm to high-profile inmates. While the conditions of a watch may be appropriate for individuals who are truly at risk of hurting themselves, they are cruel and unconstitutional under the Eighth Amendment for individuals who are not at risk. They are a form of illegal punishment. The condition of the watch for someone who is not at risk can and does cause serious mental harm. The conditions of confinement on a watch are, by all accounts, harsh and are likely to hurt an inmate's mental health rather than help it. Inmates are stripped of their clothing and underwear and dressed in a smock made of material that is akin to the material that moving companies use when wrapping furniture. Wow. Inmates are typically placed in a single cell without bed rails and offered no items of comfort. They cannot shower or shave and are sometimes not even afforded toilet paper. Meals are not provided with utensils, forcing inmates to eat with their hands. They have no ability to consult with loved ones or supportive figures. And of course, they are monitored 24/7 by prison officials. Ironically, individuals on a watch don't even receive psychiatric care. Mr. Kelly's placement on a watch was solely punitive because Mr. Kelly is a high-profile inmate. First cause of action, cruel and unusual punishment, Eighth Amendment / Bivens. Plaintiff incorporates each of the foregoing paragraphs as if fully set forth herein by subjecting plaintiff to the harsh conditions of a watch when he is not at risk. The defendants have violated plaintiff's right to be free from cruel and unusual punishment. The defendants knew or should have known that there was a high degree of risk of harm to plaintiff by subjecting him to the conditions of a watch when he was not at risk of harming himself, and that by doing so they were creating psychological harm rather than protecting plaintiff from it. The defendants acted with a deliberate and reckless disregard of the risk that plaintiff's Eighth Amendment risks would be violated. At all relevant times, the defendants acted under color of federal law. As a result, defendants' acts and or omissions, plaintiffs suffered damages, including emotional harm. Second cause of action, intentional infliction of emotional distress, Federal Tort Claims Act. Plaintiff incorporates each of the foregoing paragraphs as if fully set forth herein by subjecting plaintiff to the harsh conditions of a watch when he is not at risk of harm. The defendants have engaged in extreme and outrageous conduct. Defendant acted with the intent to cause and or disregard of a substantial probability of causing severe emotional distress. As a direct result of the actions of the defendants, plaintiff has suffered severe emotional distress. The defendants knew or should have known that there was a high degree of risk of harm to plaintiff by subjecting him to the condition of a watch when he was not a risk for a watch, and that by doing so, they were creating psychological harm rather than protecting plaintiff from it. The defendants acted with a deliberate and or reckless disregard of the risk that plaintiff's Eighth Amendment rights would be violated. At all relevant times, the defendant acted under color of federal law. As a result of defendant's acts and omissions, plaintiffs suffered damages, including emotional harm. Third cause of action, negligence, Federal Tort Claims Act. Plaintiff incorporates each of the foregoing paragraphs as if fully set forth herein. The United States and its employees have a duty of care to Mr. Kelly while he is incarcerated at MDC Brooklyn. Employees of the United States know that by placing a mentally stable person into the harsh conditions of a watch, they will cause mental distress and other psychological injury to the person. Employees of the United States acted negligently in hiring, training, and supervising those MDC officials who made a determination that plaintiff should be placed on a watch even though he was not at risk. Employees of the United States acted negligently in failing to take reasonable steps to prevent non-at-risk inmates from being placed on a watch. Employees should have known that Mr. Kelly was not at risk and should not have been placed under the harsh conditions of a watch. Employees of the United States were acting within the scope of their employment when they engaged in these negligent acts and or omissions. As a result of their negligence, plaintiffs suffered damages. Wherefore, plaintiff respectfully requests that judgment be entered against the defendants as follows. A. Award of compensatory damages for all emotional distress, humiliation, pain and suffering, and other harm in an amount to be determined at trial. Or B. Award of punitive damages in an amount to be determined at trial. C. Award of pre- and post-judgment interest, attorney's fees, and costs, any such relief of the court may deem just and proper. And it was signed by Jennifer Bonjean. And then it included a cover sheet that is standard that goes with these type of documents. And so in an article from NBC News, Donald Murphy, a spokesperson for the Bureau of Prisons, said Friday that he could not specifically address the conditions of Kelly's confinement. And he was quoted as saying, for safety and security reasons, the Bureau of Prisons does not provide information about conditions of confinement or internal practices, security practices for any particular inmate. The BOP is committed to ensuring the safety and security of all inmates in our population, our staff, and the public. Humane treatment of the men and women in our custody is a top priority. And then NBC closed out the article by stating that 3 years ago, federal officials came under considerable scrutiny when the whole debacle with Jeffrey Epstein took place. And yeah, we know how that ended. And so Jennifer Bonjean, she is fired up. In this article, she was quoted as saying that the MDC Brooklyn is being run like a gulag. I don't know what that is, so let me research that word and see what it means. She says, my partner and I spoke with him following his sentencing. He expressed that he was mentally fine, was behaving appropriately, and was eager to pursue his appeal. So y'all, let me see what gulag means. That's a new word for me. Let's see. Okay, a system of labor camps maintained in the Soviet Union from 1930 to 1955, in which many people died. A camp in the Gulag system, or any political labor camp, Gulag plural. Okay, all right. Well, I can agree with that, because these prisons do be off the chain. So, I mean, not surprised that they did that. She is the first attorney that I've known of that has filed a lawsuit, after the prisons have done that. I've read other cases where people were placed on a watch after receiving a harsh sentence, but I do agree that there should have been some type of psychological or psychiatric evaluation before, putting him on a watch. And then the inhumane treatment, or how they treat these people, stripping them down, making them sleep on the floor, watching them 24/7, while they got this little, probably like a hospital gown on. Like, that is just crazy. Oh, Jesus. Like, this whole thing is just too much. And just, knowing the details, oh my God, it's just crazy. But anyway, just want to bring this information to you. And I know some of y'all have been saying to me, like, you really don't be going in depth and blah blah blah. I mean, I don't know how in depth you guys want me to go. I'm reading you the documents. I don't get into too much dialogue other than just my personal feelings on the documents and what's stated in the documents. You should know by now that I'm not going to repeat rumors. Just because somebody posts something on social media doesn't mean that I'm going to run with it and make it a bigger story, because I want to make sure that what I am sharing on this channel is actual and factual. And even though a person in the document may be lying, it is in the document, it is in the record. And then if I find some other information that supports the fact that they're lying, I'll come back and say that to you. But, those of you who've been riding with me, for the past couple of years, how I do over here. But for those of you who may be new to the channel, this is an information channel. This isn't like a TMZ media rag, talking for sensationalism, dragging stuff out. I'm just trying to give people the facts of. But anyway, that's it for me right now. Go ahead, leave your comments below, rate the video, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. And until the next time, I shall talk to you guys later. Bye-bye.